Welcome to Mentoring Moment. I'm very excited at today's topic, episode, and guests. Listen, we are going to be talking about a subject matter that affects the entire nation. I'm very, very excited. I'm very keen to learn. And hey, if you are watching me right now, pay attention because this can save somebody's life. Welcome to Mentoring Moment. And for the sake of those who are watching, just tell us, who you are and what you do.
Okay, well, my name is Kay. I'm a medical doctor, but I'm also a psychiatrist. So a psychiatrist is a doctor who's gone through additional training. So I finished medical school and then went to do a period of training to become a psychiatrist. Took me a bit longer than most, so it took me about 7 years. It tends to take people about 6.
Wow. So when you say you did medicine and then went to do additional training, I'm an accountant, so I don't know how. So is it that? So how long do you spend in med school?
Med school. So I schooled in Nigeria. I went to the Obafemi Awolowo University. It's med school is 6 years in Nigeria. So you finish that and then you do housemanship. In Nigeria, it's 1 year. Over here, it's 2 years. Okay. And then you go into specialist training. You either go and become a general practitioner, or you become a pediatrician, a cardiologist. I chose to become a psychiatrist.
Wow. So that's after that's making about 8 years training. Then you then still go on for further training.
Yes.
So how much further training did you have to do to become a?
6 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
So in total.
in total training. Med school 6, psychiatry training 6. So that's 12 years.
Wow. 12 years of learning and training. Okay, now, psychiatrists, I don't know, when we talk about mental illness, right? What you do in terms of what you bring on board as far as human psychology and anatomy is concerned. But what do you like about why that course? Why not being a GP or being why that?
I think I fell into psychiatry by mistake. it wasn't. So I didn't leave medical school and say I was going to become a psychiatrist.
Okay. I
always thought I was going to become a pediatrician. And as time and chance happens to everyone. When I moved to the UK, my first job was in medicine, internal medicine, which was something I enjoyed. It was one of my options as well. But then I had my first job was in psychiatry. And after doing that job, I had the opportunity to go and do other things. But no, I enjoyed it almost from the first day. And the thing about it was I'd say the person who actually sold it to me was the very first consultant I worked for. I thought, yeah, this is who I'd want to be. This is how I'd want to be. He was a very caring person. He always put the needs of his patients, at the forefront of his thinking. And it was also something that required a lot of thought. So you very rarely make rash or rushed decisions. So it was something I thought, yeah, I'd like to do this. And I've been there ever since. So
what was it about it that you liked in terms of, as opposed to other part of medicine, what was it about you that you liked? Now, people tend to, until I got educated, I usually confuse psychiatrists with shrinks, So people were into, I can't even tell the difference between psychiatrists and maybe psychology, or mind readers.
We don't read minds. We wish we could, but we don't. So the difference between a psychiatrist and a psychologist, psychologists are experts as well. They're experts in the mind and the way the mind behaves, the way people think. A psychiatrist is, in addition, a medical doctor. So you're not just thinking about how the mind works. You're looking at a lot of other things that could contribute to the way the mind works. So if somebody has any difficulty at all, the difficulty might be related to situations around you, circumstances around you, but it could also be as a result of medication you're on for other reasons. It could be as a result of physical illnesses that you're suffering from. And so the job of a psychiatrist, my job is in essence to assess someone to determine whether the person is suffering from a mental illness or not, to figure out what is causing that. And a lot of the time I work within a team. So I could see somebody and say, you know what, I think you need to see a psychologist. And I say, hey, this is what you need to do. I might see them and think, hey, you need an occupational therapist, or you need a nurse to assist you in different things, or a social worker. So I work as part of a team. Yeah, so that's in essence what
So
it is.
you mentioned that you are not a mind reader, right?
No.
So how can you then tell if someone is mentally ill or not? If I tell you I hear voices, I mean, well, I'm just lying. How can you tell?
So I'll give an example. If someone comes to me and says, oh, I've got diabetes, okay, you ask questions. And diabetes is a known illness. We know what it is. Sometimes diabetes can present in a way that is different from how it usually presents. But there are signs, there are symptoms. And people, sometimes you have really, really good liars who can lie. But it's the same thing as someone saying, oh, I'm hearing voices. It's not, there are specific illnesses that cause you to hear voices. It usually doesn't come alone, it comes with accompaniments. So it's my job to tease all of that out, to figure out, well, he says he's hearing voices, okay, tell me about them. Tell me what they are. When did it start? How does it affect you? Is it a problem? Why do you need help with it? What kind of help are you looking for? So even if someone is, I'll use the term lying very loosely, even someone is lying, there's a reason why they're lying. And so part of my job is to meet the person's needs if I can. And if I can't, then I usually let them know.
Okay, I know that psychiatrist, or now which part of medicine works with the police then? You know, say for example, you have people who take advantage of the law, they commit a crime, and they want to blame that crime on mental illness. Yeah,
so that's a psychiatrist.
Okay, so
that's a specific type of psychiatrist.
Okay, so are you saying you will be able to tell that this person is actually a normal person, but is just lying about what they've done with this crime?
The term normal is can be misleading, because what is normal? Given the right circumstances, people will behave in a certain way that they otherwise might not behave. So it's things like that you take into consideration. But that, in essence, is my job. At the moment, I work in a prison, and a lot of the people I see are people who would say, oh, I have this illness or that illness. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. And my job is in essence to say, well, if I see a mental illness, if I see a diagnosable mental illness, see it, treat it, and that's it. If I can't add it, if what the person is telling me doesn't fit with a mental disorder, I'll let them know as well.
So now, talking about mental illness, my maternal uncle had a mental problem. He passed away long time ago. So how can you, what, I know I saw my mom go through so much just to help him, and even as a family, I was young then. So how can you, what are the early signs of mental illness?
So when we say mental illness, it's an extremely broad term. It's any disorder of the mind or brain, so it could mean anything. It could mean somebody who's depressed, it could mean someone who's anxious, it could mean someone who's psychotic, so that in essence has difficulty telling what's real from what's not real. It could be somebody who's manic, who's got bipolar. And it could be somebody who's got OCD, it could be someone with an eating disorder. Really, really broad, really, really wide. And I guess the only thing you would know is when someone begins to act in a way that is not usual for that person. Because there's some things that we consider mental disorders. And I use the term disorder rather than illness. Some people have mental disorders that are assets to them. So somebody who is autistic, for instance, autism can be an asset. Some people have ADHD. That could be an asset. A lot of very creative people have bipolar disorder. That could be an asset for them. And it's about managing the difficulties that they might have and helping them with the strengths that having those kind of disorders can help them with.
But in terms of communication, if I notice that someone I know has a behavioral pattern that is otherwise different from the way they normally do, then how should I, because it's very difficult for them to see themselves.
Sometimes people do. Sometimes people know.
Oh, so you can know something is wrong?
Oh yeah, a lot of people do.
Really?
So I guess the important thing is communication. So it's about speaking to the person.
So someone with a mental disorder, right, can actually know that something is not right?
Yes.
Really?
Yes. So there's the term we use is insight. So insight is you recognize that you have difficulties. And lots of people with mental illnesses or mental disorders have insight into their difficulties. If they don't have insight, they're not going to accept treatment. I mean, if somebody told you, hey, you've got a high blood pressure, take this medication, and you don't believe you have high blood pressure, you're not going to take the medication.
Yeah, of course, yes.
And the same thing with the mental illness. Someone says, hey, you're mentally ill, take this. Or this is what you need to do. You'll be like, no, I'm sorry, there's nothing wrong with me. So which is why I think the key thing is information, communication, education. So if you form particularly those who are already in relationships with the person, so a father, a brother, a sister, a mother, or cousin, or friend, it's about talking to the person, hey, what's going on? And if you notice something out of the ordinary, talk to the person about it. Ask him if it's something that he'd like to discuss with his GP. Let him know, hey, I'm concerned about you, and I just want to be sure that there's nothing, we're not missing anything. Because a lot of these things are very, very treatable. Very treatable. Particularly if you catch them early.
So what you mentioned the information communication and education. Now, in terms of information, what should we as a society or a community do, right, to put out enough information out there? What can we do? What can we do to create like more awareness, to help? Because if I feel something is wrong, I don't. It will take a lot for me to come out and say,
Yeah, but I guess it depends on who you go to. So if you have a headache, you're not going to come to me to say, well, I've got a headache. But there are people you will tell that you've got a headache. If you have, if you're diabetic, and I'm sure there are lots of diabetic people all over the place, they won't tell you they're diabetic, but they go and meet their doctor. So I always encourage people, you have any concerns or anything, go see your doctor and say, hey, this is happening. I'm not sure what it is. Sometimes your family might notice that you're squinting a lot. You're not finding it difficult when you're watching TV, you're squinting. And they'll say, hey, do you want to go do an eye test or something? And I think it's that same principle. You notice something out of the ordinary. You're not going to treat it yourself. You're going to say, hey, have you thought about asking for professional help? You could go to the optician and they say, no, your eyes are fine. Maybe it was the lighting or something. So it could be nothing.
So what can we do? I mean, you said most cases of mental disorder are treatable. So what can we do to prevent it?
Some of them are, a lot of them are preventable. And I guess it's about living as healthy a life as you can, getting enough rest, doing things that make you happy, avoiding things that are known to cause, not to cause, but to be associated with mental illnesses. So things like illicit drugs, a lot of them are associated with mental disorders. So it's about avoiding things like that, to do things in moderation. If you have, I mentioned that illnesses can sometimes be as a result of physical illnesses. So it's about you have an illness, you treat it. Try and stay healthy. And
So-
I know that's broad, but we're talking about things that are really, really for illness one is different, for illness two is different.
Okay, let's talk about faith and mental disorder. Is there anything a faith community can do to help someone who has mental disorder?
Yeah, what I find in my job is that a lot of people with mental disorders are alone. So when I say alone, they've got no one to talk to, no one who looks out for them, nobody who calls and says, "Hey, how you doing?" You know, and I think that's something that a lot of faith organizations, churches, mosques, that's something they do really well. They look out for their own. You know, they check up on people. They notice things are going wrong. They might not know what to do, but at least they're there. You know, and I think it's about faith organizations being aware of the fact that a mental disorder is no different, 99% of the time, is no different from a physical disorder. And a lot of these things are treatable. So you'd see someone who's really, really unwell. And we know of people that who have been unwell and have dramatically improved with treatment. You know, so it is doable. And sometimes all it takes is for you to see the benefit of treating a mental illness. And it does change people. I know the African community there's still a certain stigma attached to mental disorders. And I think that is from a lack of information, a lack of knowledge about what exactly it entails, and then how it is treated. What we know is people who have mental illness are, you know, the wander the streets back in Africa. But it doesn't have to be that way. Those are people who are not treated. They're treated and you'll be surprised.
Okay, so now, if I'm an employer of labor, all right, because if one has had mental disorder before, they will need to declare it in the application or in their assessment or application. What will you advise a typical employer who is going through a resume right now and has flagged up the fact that one candidate has been treated for mental disorder? What will you tell that employer to do?
Well, there's anti-discrimination legislation in this country, so you can't discriminate against somebody on the basis of the fact that the person has a mental disorder or the gender or anything like that.
Yeah, but there could be fear. There could be the fear of, oh, wow, this person has had this issue before, and I don't want to, out of guilt, I don't want to put them in an environment where they'll be so stressed and triggered because you don't know what it is. Yes,
and I guess it's about, because usually I think a lot of larger organizations have an occupational health department, and the employee would liaise with the occupational health department and they see if they need adaptations made. Because a lot of people, you'd be surprised walking out this, 4 out of 10 people could be mentally unwell. You don't know which of them is. And a lot of people have mental illnesses or had mental illnesses treated, no longer a problem. Some mental illnesses are assets for people working in certain organizations. If you go to a place like Cambridge, for instance, a lot of there's a huge proportion relative to the rest of the country of people who are on the autistic spectrum. Now, people look at autism as an illness. It is an asset for a lot of people. It helps them. They have the extraordinary focus that a lot of us lack. And some people have ADHD, which detracts from their ability to focus. But again, that inability to focus on some things sometimes is an asset. It helps them in other jobs that they might choose to do. So it depends on the individual. There's no one-size-fits-all advice for everyone. The presence of an illness, of somebody having an illness or a disorder, within your organization could actually be an asset to the organization. And it's about looking at people's strengths, being aware of their weaknesses. And if you have an open and honest conversation about it with people, they would usually be open to telling you, well, these are the difficulties that I have.
Okay. Now, lastly, I don't want to take too much of your time. You did mention that you came into psychiatric by accident. So what will you tell someone right now who is thinking, okay, what option should I, I'm in med school, I'm thinking about, I don't know what my options will be. So what will you do? How will you sell
psychiatry?
Psychiatry to the person, yeah.
I think you have to first determine what kind of person you are. What are the things that excite you? What are the things that play to your strengths? If you're somebody who likes to do things by rote without necessarily putting too much thought, you just do this, repeating the same thing over and over again, then go be a surgeon. If you actually want to engage your brain, if you want to, because psychiatry, and I shouldn't be doing this, but psychiatry, pediatrics, internal medicine, those are specialties where you actually have to think. And if you like a challenge, then those are the places that you need to go to. If you want to help people, then I think you should be a psychiatrist. It gives you, I have probably the most exciting job in the world. I never know what I'm going to see at work. I never know who I'm going to meet. You never know what stories you're going to hear. Some of the stories are heartbreaking, but a lot of the time you're able to help. A lot of the stories are things you'll find somewhere where a little change makes a whole world of a difference to people.
Okay. One last question. I know I said one last question before. Stress. Do you agree that stress can lead to mental disorder?
Without a doubt.
Really? So what measure can someone put in place to avoid stress? I mean, extreme stress can become a disorder. What measure can one put? I know it's easier. We can go through the normal narrative of go on holidays or go do your sport or go exercise. But sometimes those things sometimes can be very unrealistic. What would you advise?
The human mind and the human body, it can only do so much. If you overwork it, it'll stop and say, hey, enough. And I think we all have different limits. I think Baroness Thatcher was said to need only 4 hours of sleep. But for a lot of us, we need a lot more than 4 hours. And I think it's about being aware that you can only go on for so long, and look for ways, whatever works for you, ways of switching off, pressing the reset button, go on holiday, go running, take a walk, read a book that is completely unrelated to what it is that you do, watch a film, play with your children, although that can be stressful. But I think it's about finding something that completely switches you off. Because the thing about life is that actions, behaviors, they have consequences. So you need to be aware that, hey, I go on like this, there will be consequences. If someone eats the food that 3 or 4 people should be eating in a day, there will be a consequence to that. So I think that's it. Just be aware that there are limits. Look for ways to switch off.
Right. Dr. K, thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming. Really
thank you for having me.
Thanks a lot. Thank you very much. Thank you.